So with the Olympics coming to a close, I think it's easy and safe to say that the hockey was not as good as it has been with the NHL players.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's interesting that USA would have had probably one of the best teams that I think they've ever had since pros have been allowed in the game. And obviously Russia, we will call them.
OAR?
Yeah, Russia, doping Russia, has really dominated everybody, as they should. They had the best players. I think it led to just uninteresting hockey, in my opinion.
Yeah, with the exception of women's hockey.
Women's hockey was probably the best part of the Olympics in my mind, other than curling. The women's hockey tournament was great. It was interesting, and yes, we're a little biased, obviously, because Team USA won for only the second time. Did you know that since the women's tournament has existed in the Olympics, that there have only been 2 gold medal winners? And it has been both the United States and Canada.
Really?
The only 2 that have won it. And the only teams that have actually medaled were Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, and then, of course, the U.S. and Canada.
So Korea is not doing so
Korea
hot in
is
that
not.
department, huh?
Yeah, no. They went for the tournament. They played 3 games, I believe. Lost all 3 games. Their goal for and against ratio was 1-20. They scored 1 goal and had 20 scored against them, and it was the combined Korean team. So that would be North and South Korea, I think, playing together. It's good to see another country in there. They're obviously quite a ways away. Russia did pretty well for the women's team, for the women's tournament, that's to say. But I think the women's hockey, this is where women's hockey should shine. And we have discussions about why hitting isn't allowed in women's hockey, but even without it, there were a couple big hits.
Yeah.
Did you see the hit that Canada put on in front of the U.S. net that they did not call?
No, I missed that.
Just completely cleared somebody out, which is great. I thought it was awesome. I think it proves that it should be allowed, and we can have that discussion. But it's probably the greatest women's team that they've had since the very first tournament, which was in 1998. That team was incredibly dominant. I think they had first of all, they're in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, that one specific team in 1998. They went undefeated, and they outscored their opponents something ridiculous, like 36 to 9 or something like that throughout that entire tournament. This year was not as dominant, which I think was more interesting. I think the kind of the thought process is instead of having a team like Russia dominate in the men's tournament, that it was better to have very, very close games, which obviously the women's game came down to a shootout. And we can have arguments all day, left and right, that shootouts are not a decent way to end an important hockey game, which I would agree with.
I agree.
So I think the NHL does it the right way, where shootouts are part of the regular season, but they're not part of the playoffs. Right. I would love to see the Olympic hockey or the IOC adopt that same format.
Yeah.
Where they're using shootouts during the round robin, but the medal rounds at least go forever.
Yeah, golden goal is the way to do it, for sure.
I think so, forever. 'Cause it's just more interesting. I mean, yeah, the U.S. won, and yeah, that would be great. And if Canada won the same way, I think it would still be just as interesting. Where I'm a little biased, I care a little bit more. I don't know what your opinion about Olympic hockey, but I think it's great for hockey in the country. It's great to see more than just professionals do well, but I don't know. I think it was a weird advantage to have guys like Kovalchuk on, as great as he is, on the Russian team.
Yeah, and Datsuk with the hands like silk. Unbelievable.
You can definitely tell he's lost a step.
Yeah.
He still looks great. Both of them, obviously Kovalchuk, but Datsuk could still be playing in the NHL.
So with women's hockey, do you think that this is going to bring more awareness to the United States and more viewers for women's hockey?
I hope so. I mean, so there are obviously the NWHL, right? Mm-hmm. As well as I think there's a competing women's league as well that doesn't get enough attention. They play like college schedule once a week. I think it would be a good thing for people to go and take a look at, because it's interesting hockey. They're good. They're definitely good. And I think it did a lot of stuff when they were in the Olympics the first time. And the fact that the United States won the gold medal in 1998, I think did a lot of things. Just like the Miracle on Ice in 1980 did a lot of things for just hockey in general in this country. More people had paid attention to it. And when you see an NHL team win the Stanley Cup in an area, you start to see, 15 years down the road, players come out of that area. Guys like Austin Matthews, who've come out of, the Pacific Southwest, right, who came out of Arizona, when you've got teams in California that are winning the Cup. So I think now you've got people down in the South, starting to pop up from the late 90s win from Dallas. People coming from Florida, as the Florida teams have done well. Tampa has done well, and the few runs the Panthers have made. So I think anything is good for the sport. I hope that it does well, but I don't know. Bettman needs to get his head out of his ass and come to some sort of deal with the IOC. I know there were reports that in past attempts, when Bettman had been trying to pull out of the Olympics, that he wanted the games moved back to the Summer Olympics. This was before the Winter Olympics were a thing, 50, 60 years ago, but moved to the Summer Olympics so it wouldn't affect the schedule. He claims some of it has to do with player safety, but it really has to do with money. All of it has to do with money. The IOC wants the NHL players there, and the NHL does not, or Gary Bettman specifically does not want the NHL players there. I think it would make for a much more interesting tournament, because at this point, it's lopsided to European teams, which is okay. It makes for a better story if one of the North American teams, Canada, US, beat one of the European teams because of the professionals they have there. The professionals that they have are generally not at the level of the NHL for the most part. You get the Kovalchuks and the Datsyuks that I think are obviously good enough to still play in the NHL, especially. You've got a lot of former NHL players that are now playing in Germany, playing in Russia, playing in these different leagues, which I think, I don't know, I think it would just make a more even playing field if it was interesting. Obviously, we know that Canada, the reason that, so this is something that was interesting that we found out. So Canada created the Summit Series in 1972. Canada actually pulled out of the Olympics and boycotted the Olympics because while the IOC did not allow professional players, the Russian players were paid by the government to be hockey players. So that was considered a professional player, but the IOC still allowed those players. Canada had a problem with it, so they pulled the team out. They created the Summit Series in place of that for that tournament, and that ended up being incredibly interesting. They had a lot of future Hall of Famers that played in that Summit Series that they've done more than once back in the 70s. I think that having something as a different tournament would do well, because when you have the amateurs playing in the Olympics, it just becomes the World Juniors. Like it's like the graduated World Juniors.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It seemed like with the teams from the U.S., it was all the guys that you would see in the World Juniors.
And then former NHL players.
Yeah, like Gianta.
Yep.
Who cares about that?
Gianta and James Wisniewski, and even Canada had a couple, I think. And what was interesting is, so Canada wins the bronze medal, and of the 4 goal scorers in that game, 3 of them were NHL players, significant NHL players. Chris Kelly, and I completely forget who the other players were at this point.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I looked it up earlier. It doesn't matter because they won bronze, not gold. But I think it's interesting. This is the first time I think I'm rooting for Germany, or have been rooting for Germany against Russia. But yeah, it's interesting. I hope it changes. I would love to see the professionals come back to the Olympics. But if they're not, then just make it an even playing field. I think it's fine. It's a once every 4 years. It's not that big of a deal. Right. A lot of people freaked out about it, but it's not that big of a deal.
Well, their main complaint was it's not fair to the fans. It's not fair to the owners of the teams. But I think,
which means they want more money.
In terms of the IOC, you want more viewers. So you see your favorite NHL players playing in the Winter Olympics,
right?
In hockey,
right?
They're going to get more viewership.
Right. More worldwide viewership.
Exactly.
So part of the reason why NHL players were originally brought in to the Olympics was because Gary Bettman has even gone on record, has been on record as saying that the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona, I believe, where the NBA allowed professional teams and the U.S. absolutely dominated, brought a lot of attention to the game of basketball. And now we see basketball is gigantic in China.
Right.
It's really big in Lithuania. It's really big in Spain. There are large parts of Europe and the rest of the world where an American sport has become very popular. Hockey being a North American sport, arguably, some people argue that it started in Britain, but obviously the common knowledge is it started in Canada. I don't know if it would have the same effect, and obviously didn't, because you don't have a professional team that dominated the way that the NBA did, because the NBA in 1992 was predominantly an American sport. The players in the sport were American. Now you have a lot of European players. In 1998, when the NHL joined the Olympics, or were allowed to play in the Olympics, there were so many players that were already European. and already Canadian.
Right.
So now it's players that they already know of from their home team, and they're not playing together. So there wasn't a dream team. You take the top two countries in the NHL, which is both the United States and Canada, and you split them up, and you make a rivalry out of it, which is a great way to watch a sport. But then you take, at that time, a smaller percentage, and now a much larger percentage of players from European countries like Sweden and Finland, and of course Russia, and so on and so forth, which is now growing. And I think it has done a lot to grow the sport, but not the way that the Dream Team in 1992 did.
Yeah.
I don't believe that for sure. So
There's no more miracles.
no more miracles. It would have been if the U.S. beat Russia, it would have been the Canadian team had they gone for the gold. I don't know, maybe. I mean, the U.S. team, as it were definitely underdogs. I think they would have been lucky to make it even to the bronze medal game. Of course, they came up short, but that's what makes the women's tournament so interesting. I think the women's tournament was definitely the highlight, unexpectedly.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be. So, yeah. So, I want to remind everyone listening that this episode of 5 Minute Major is sponsored by Health IQ. Health IQ is a pretty clever insurance company that helps athletes and athletic people save money on insurance. So if you're an athlete, if you missed your Olympic goal, if you get paid to play in the NHL so you couldn't go to the Olympics, but you need savings on life insurance, go visit healthiq.com/THS. Health IQ is a pretty cool company that sponsors weightlifters, swimmers, and helps all kinds of athletes save money and get lower rates on their insurance by grouping them together with other athletes. So if you're interested in saving money on insurance, make sure you visit healthiq.com/THS. Thank you for your sponsorship, and make sure you go check them out. But yeah, so the Olympics are over. Other than hockey, what was your favorite part of the Olympics?
The curler.
Definitely.
That got caught doping. How jacked do you need to be to slide a rock down some ice?
Pretty much. I mean, they're 40 pounds, right? 40-pound rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I should do some steroids. Fuck it.
Let's start doing them today.
We can't get
start our cycle.
Start the cycle now. Yep. You brought to you here the Hockey Show podcast, now sponsored by steroids. By the way, be healthy and go get health insurance.
It's gonna be bigger, better, and stronger.